Hello, chat, and welcome to the DeFi Recode episode 12. Today is an amazing episode. We've got Brendan O'Connell on, an artist well known for doing paintings about Walmart brands, capturing everyday aesthetics. He co created one of the largest single day art events during which over 400,000 school children made a thematic art on the same day. O'Connell's been profiled in The New Yorker, the Sunday morning show on CBS, which I watched as a child growing up, and was a guest of Stephen Colbert and the Colbert Report, dubbed by the media as the Warhol of Walmart. He's here to speak to us today about art, NFTs, growing up in the art scene, and kind of the revolution into this digital market. And I'm just kind of excited to kick it off with the first question that's not mentioned here, Brendan. How did you grow up and like introduce yourself to everybody a little bit more? How'd you grow up and kind of get into art and get into the scene and everything like that?
First off, thanks, Fran, for doing this. This is great. I grew up in Atlanta in pretty traditional household. You know, my mom was a teacher, my dad was a lawyer, and nobody really did art in our house, and there wasn't any artist in my family. So it was a little bit of kind of out of left field. Like when I came back from Europe and told people I was an artist, they were like, "What?" But because I never drew as a kid. I taught myself to draw when I was 22.
Wow, it's never too late.
And so, but then when you study a little art history, a lot of artists like Matisse started around then. Van Gogh didn't start till he was 27 to teach himself how to draw. I think a lot of people end up at art after failing at other things. It's like you become an artist by default, but it's a way to get engaged and simultaneously check out.
What led you to Europe, and what did you find there that kind of got you into it, got you thinking about it?
I had a weird, I mean, my dad was from New York and I grew up in the South. So he was like very parlez-vous New York, very New Yorker. And I didn't, growing up in Georgia, there were not many people who kind of went to Europe. So my dad was kind of an outlier, and he just started sending me to Europe when I was 14, and I would spend summers there all throughout high school and college. So I had this weird kind of very upper middle class upbringing, but then summers I would go to Europe and have a different life. But when I graduated college, I went to France to write a novel about a group of painters. And I met all these painters in Paris, and I knew all these writers in Paris, and all the painters were happy people, and all the writers were kind of miserable. And I was like, I think I want to be happy. And so I started writing this novel about a group of painters, and I kind of ended up becoming one of the characters.
That's awesome. And that's kind of how you got into it from there. Wow, that's really amazing. So then you came home, and what got you into like the Walmart paintings? How did all of that start?
Well, I moved to New York, and kind of set up a studio in New York, and was doing a lot of abstract painting. I was like a closet figurative painter, but the shows that I were doing were abstract shows. And because I had survived doing portraits in the street in Paris for a summer, and then I was the resident caricaturist in the south of France where I lived for a couple of years. And when I got back to the States, I'm doing these abstract paintings, but I would do occasional portrait commissions. And then I moved to the country, and a couple things happened. One, I kind of lost faith in abstraction. Something weird, like it just felt like not many people really knew what good abstract art was versus bad abstract art. And And then I had a kid, and I pictured my daughter 30 years later. I'm dead, and she's inherited a barn filled with abstract paintings that nobody wanted. And that thought was very depressing to me. That it's like, what, I'm going to leave her a note. Here are the matches. Here is the gasoline. Light it up. Like, because what does a kid want to do with a bunch of his dad's dead paintings, dead dad's paintings, but around that time, I just started thinking, well, what if I just paint whatever I feel like? If I'm gonna be stop doing what I think is important and start doing what I feel like doing. And I lived in the country in Connecticut, and I realized that the only place I saw people, when you're in rural America and with technology and everybody being homebodies, and this is like long before COVID, it was like I would go in line at the bank, and I was the only person in line. It was a country bank where you could say, I need to get me a dog biscuit and a mortgage. And you could go in with your dog, and they'd give you a biscuit. But I never saw people. But then when I went on a weekly shop to Walmart, that was the only place I saw actual people milling about. And it felt like I was living the future in the present whenever I would go there. It was a very disorienting environment for me, like to suddenly be around people and around a bunch of stuff when most of the time I'm living in my head. And so I found Walmart a really like colorful and uh, compelling environment. And so that's kind of how I just started. Like, I paid an out of work actress to shop, and I took photos of her shopping. And that was how I didn't even realize a 10-year project was unfolding.
Gonna evolve from there. That's amazing. And like it makes sense. Like I actually spent a year in the country myself, like living out in a farmhouse, and you're right. You're in your own head. You're living on your own, and you're at your house, and then you go into town, and the only place you really see people is shopping. At Walmart is the biggest thing in town. And town could be, it was like a 20-30 minute drive to get into town. So it's kind of funny how that clicks and it resonates with people. When you like got into paintings, you were doing like mostly portraits of people or like abstract art.
Well, I was painting at home abstract, but I was a street artist. I was doing portraits, $10 portraits in the street. And so I did that in the summers, and then in the winters I was the caretaker of a castle in the south of France. And so I would just kind of be alone all winter and paint. It was kind of like The Shining, but I was painting instead of writing.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Honing the craft, really honing the craft, because these paintings that I have them up here on the stream are some amazing work. And like, how did you pick these settings when you were in Walmart? Like, what struck you about each one of the settings you have here in like the products or people?
Well, well, I mean that's the funny thing is a few thing. It was around 10 years, and I still do. I don't know if like there's a really big Walmart painting in the corner of my living room, but like I I did a bunch of different things over the 10-year period where um, sometimes I was more drawn to the products, sometimes it was the architecture and the disorienting open space, and sometimes it was you know um, the shoppers and how they kind of milled about and interacted with stuff. And a few things happened when I first went in there. Barnes and Noble used to be a really big thing. I don't know if some of your listeners have heard of Barnes and Noble, but they were everywhere. And
Yeah.
now it feels like they're moving toys. But I really had that sensation that my kids' children, you could tell them stories. There used to be this place where you could buy a bicycle and even try it out in the aisle. And you could also buy a loaf of bread, like that you could actually touch this stuff. Whereas, it feels like everything by then will be, point and
Delivered.
click, delivered by drones.
Yeah.
So, and you saw that happening while I was doing this project. You saw Barnes and Noble's kind of, you know, everyone was so mad at Barnes and Noble's when it came about, and now they feel nostalgic about something that they were so pissed off about their arrival. And and I kind of felt like, that could happen to Walmart, that could happen to Amazon, that could happen to any of these big things where like they ruin small bookstores, they ruin, and then you're sad when they're going away or changing. So that part I found interesting. The other part I found interesting was like, smartphones didn't exist when I started the project. So you would have, when I took a picture in a store, somebody would tap me on the shoulder and say, you're not allowed to take pictures here. You have to leave. And so I got thrown out of more Walmarts than most New Yorkers have ever been in. It was very strange. But now with cell phones, everyone has a smartphone that clicks on an image, compares the price, and so they couldn't invite everyone to leave at this juncture.
That is amazing, and like I'm sure back then when you started, you had to have like a larger, clunkier camera so you were more visible to employees. I'm sure you kind of stood out like a sore thumb, kind of walking in there trying to, or were you able to like sneak? How'd you do it? Like how?
Well, I started, I had one of those big, EOS cameras, which was in the like little bread basket part of the cart, and I would just lift it up surreptitiously and click photos that I saw. And then it got to the point where I would invite 5 artist friends to lunch, and I'd be like, okay, we're going to go to this Walmart and we're going to get thrown out. Some of us are going to get thrown out in 5 minutes. Some of us, I want you guys to spread out all over the store and try to get as many photos as you can, and just cool shots that you think will be, you know,
Like raiding Walmarts with artists. That's actually amazing. I love that.
and so we did that a couple times, and I got a data bank of a lot of imagery. And then once the New Yorker did that profile on me, and the media kind of blitzed, Walmart really kind of made it very easy on me. And I think I could make a phone call now and set up an easel in anywhere in the world and do a painting in a Walmart.
That was going to be my next question. Like, there had to have been a point in time where somebody was cool at Walmart and was like, "We need to let this guy. We need to contact him and let him do this." You know what I mean? Give him a lifetime pass to Walmart.
Yeah, well, once like at one juncture, they gave me a cherry picker, and that's when I like hired a professional photographer and just kind of had him take these massive panoramic shots of Walmart, because I wasn't, I couldn't be everywhere. And also it was just, it was one of those days where, I don't know if you've seen that show, Law and Order SVU. Stabler's wife is an actress, well, an actress that I knew, and so I had her come be the super mom shopping. So I was taking pictures of her, shopping in this Walmart, and this professional photographer was on the cherry picker taking all these shots, and I had a couple of other photographers, and that was when I kind of just had the run of a store. But they're in the business of moving goods, and that can be disruptive. So I don't think I can get a cherry picker that often. So I tried to seize the day.
Yeah, use the opportunity. Absolutely. I kind of want to roll it back a little bit because I am interested in like what was the first piece of art that you collected that really struck yourself like getting into the art world? Do you remember like a first piece, or do you have like a piece that you've kept all these years?
Um, well, so I should go back to the first painting I did. Like I had been drawing for about a year, and I've been doing chalk pastels, which is also like drawing. And then I an artist gave me an oil pack, and I did my first oil painting on it, and that was like a weird, trippy experience where I had the feeling like as the paint was slithering across the page that I'd done it. It felt like I had done it a million times before, and I knew I had never done it before. So that was like very, just that sense of
You found home.
either reincarnation or that feeling of I've come home. This is what I'm meant to do. And you don't get that little destiny embrace from destiny too often, but that was one of those where I just felt like, oh, and it was like a combination of mystical and practical of, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. um so but and that was when the guy who owned the castle was a painter, and he invited me to spend the winter there and kind of be his caretaker. And so I got to live with his paintings a lot, and I really loved his sense of color. And at that juncture, you know, sometimes you see color and it's like, oh, that's red. But sometimes you see a red and it makes you feel, for lack of a better word, high, where like I would just see the world in a very, there was a several year period where like I just was like one of those crazy mystical figures wandering. I was broke and I would just like walk around and study, patterns of rain, the light and rain on on the pavement and the cobblestones in the south of France. Everything I saw just felt really kind of hokey and mystical, but it was very real to me, if that makes any sense. I
Absolutely.
had stopped doing drugs at that point, so it was
It wasn't the drugs.
it wasn't the drugs. It was just like I've been sober a couple of years at that point, but it was very alive in enlivening, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like kind of like opening up to a new world, and then you're looking for like content for yourself, and just what can you paint, and like kind of opens your eyes to a whole new volume of like how you look at everything, I guess.
Well, the other piece about that is if you never drew as a child and then suddenly you see a world of shapes and colors, it was like, I cannot believe that this world existed all this time and I never saw it. Do you know what I mean? It's like opening
Yes.
into another dimension in a way. And and the epiphany was as real. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, The Sixth Sense, where he's like, I see dead people. It was like, I see a world of shapes and colors, and I can't believe people didn't tell me that this existed before.
I feel like I'm getting left out because I'm so bad at drawing and art, but I love it
I
so much.
I could teach you over a weekend.
That's amazing. I'm gonna have to take you up on that for sure one day. Absolutely. How
So,
did you like get into like what? How did you then find cryptocurrency and like digital art?
so oddly, so when in that France period of time, I was hanging out with this very eccentric guy. And when I was a portrait artist in front of Notre Dame, the guy I hung out with for 2 years was a guy named Max Kaiser, who was he was just an odd visionary. And anybody who's follows this podcast would know that he is a figure in crypto world. And I went and looked at an email that I got from him in 2011 or 12. And he's like, you need to be the first artist to accept Bitcoin as payment for art. And I'm like, I need to pay rent today. Like it was so out of the realm of, so that like I heard about it way before most humans, but was just in the midst of trying to survive as an artist. And it's weird when you're kind of living in the present and seeing the future. Like some people are able to make that leap, and some people are either they have a magic bank from a previous industry or from family that allows them to like weather the shift. But I was in that kind of daily struggle grind that I was not in a position to take it up. In fact, someone offered me, 500 Bitcoin, 800 Bitcoin, I think it was. And at the time when it was like nothing for a $1,500 painting. And I was like, I kind of need the $1,500. So like I passed on that, which, it sounds horrible and everyone has those stories of when they should have done something, but I'm kind of glad I didn't because I have bad ADD and I would have lost those Bitcoin at the time.
Anyway, yeah.
So it would have been worse to be like, I gave up, however many millions of dollars that was.
Absolutely. And I feel like the same thing happened, my growing up 10 years ago. I was nowhere in a stable position to hold on to Bitcoin when some of my friends were like, you should check this out. It's like, yeah, just like you said, like I need to pay rent today though, and my landlord does not accept Bitcoin. So this doesn't work.
Right, right. And I mean that's one of the big struggles of like when we're doing things in life and you live with different people and the reality of different people are on different time frames and have different sense of the future. Like for some people for me the future was always a friendly place. Like I always thought I was going to be fine 6 months or 6 years from now. It was like as an artists are almost like junkies in that it's like the next 20 days it might all fall apart. I got to figure out how to survive in these next 20 days. So
That,
that's
yeah, absolutely. I know the feeling growing up myself. And so, like, did Max just like keep harping on you over the years? Like, what made you eventually
so
take the leap?
Max was a very big influence on me, and I met him at a key point in my life in that you know, he had just sort of punched out of Wall Street and he was in Paris just kind of detoxing from the financial world and writing screenplays and poetry and I was his artist friend, and so he would have these brokers come into to Paris, and he had Alec Baldwin when he came in on a movie, and he would just take me out as his artist sidekick friend. And I was the Stacy at the time.
You guys would slay the town.
And we would go, and then he would sell these people my art, and that was kind of how I was surviving. And then he just sort of coached me on how to like survive. I think his quote was, "You're like an economic and sexual tabula rasa. I need to help you teach you how to fish in the contemporary marketplace,"
That's awesome.
which feels like a very Max quote. But
And that was all while you were in France before you came back
yeah,
to.
so that was almost 25, 28 years ago.
Oh my gosh.
And then and I knew he was talking about digital currencies back in 96, 97. He invented one in 97 called the Hollywood dollars, the Hollywood Stock Exchange. So it, it very few people, the minute they get a like he had a he had this old typewriter that he found on a sidewalk. And so it was one of those old things where you'd like hunt and peck and that's what he was working on. So like when he bought his first laptop in whatever 95, 6, something like that, he immediately saw what the internet was. It was kind of crazy how very few people really kind of get what something means, and he got it right away.
Yeah, he understood. And you're like kind of watching like, I don't know, I'm gonna check this out for a bit.
And I was very connected to, the physical, the there's something about the physical world of paint that, when you're attached to the physical. And the reality is everything is a mental experience. Like you think about, painting a painting or running a marathon or having sex, like all these things are intensely physical activities. But the real activity is the mental piece that's going on at the time. And there's um that's where this whole digital direction that everything is going on. Like when I shifted to become a painter rather than a writer, it did feel like the whole world was going into this visual sandbox to play, and that I didn't really have the tools. So I needed to, verse myself in shape and color and learn how to play in a visual sandbox because everything was going in that direction. And now it feels like everything's going in the next stage of that visual experience of like a digital non-physical zone.
I guess this is a great way to kind of lead into that further, but a question from the chat from Pow Pow Power Live. He says, do you know what OpenSea is?
Open Sea Gallery.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's like sort of the digital Walmart
Of NFTs.
of NFTs, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to put
Am I correct?
it. Absolutely. Dead on the head, yeah. So what got you into like Cardano and NFTs on Cardano?
So so and I'm late to the game in that, this is just in the last year that I've been uh experimenting, and then I went all in on crypto and like just started doing a lot of research.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend of mine called me and just you know, old friend from way back, and he just started talking about third generation blockchain. And he talked to me a lot about Cardano. And he was like, as an artist, this just links up with your view of the world. And Charles has this like super like visionary humanist view of technology. I mean, because a lot of technology people, when you have that big of a brain and you go in that direction, it's almost, well, it's very on the spectrum. Like a lot of tech people just go in that direction of we're on the verge of merging with the machine. And whereas Charles has a very humanistic approach. And that whole appeal of getting 1 billion people in Africa, getting the unbanked digital identities and digital access, that to me was a lot. It was a big idea, that a way bigger idea than my like every artist idea. But I really thought that if we can spark this notion of creativity in everyone, will effectively change the way the next generation thinks. And Charles is doing that on like a massive way to kind of democratize this access. And I feel like blockchain and or Bitcoin and Ethereum are kind of iterations of this, but I was struck by this idea of, a combination of frustration on my first NFT on Ethereum, and it cost me $250 to just set it up, and then it it what was weird about the ether in those galleries, the really hot galleries where these artists were making millions of dollars, was that they replicated exactly what the real world is doing. And one of the most offensive things about the New York art world is, there are a handful of gatekeepers that keep most people out of the inner room. There's like velvet rope to a velvet room to a velvet rope to like there are many rooms to get into where things actually happen. And it felt like a lot of those galleries on Ethereum had just replicated what the top 10 galleries in Manhattan had been doing for years. And so you have this democratic visionary approach that's now possible, but we've created gatekeepers that really impede that sense of decentralization that everyone's talking about.
That makes a lot of sense. And like I can see the frustration like trying to put something on Ethereum and the cost there with gas and minting the NFTs. I've never done anything like that. Like what's the process like and the
Well,
frustrations you ran into there?
well, and that's the thing is like well, when I started on the Cardano, like I hooked up with a really bright programmer because there weren't ways to, hey, send us your JPEG and we'll turn it into an NFT. Which now it's amazing how in the last few months there are a lot of people who can make CNFTs now. But when I did my first one, like I had to have a programmer partner walk me through this, and that brings me back to like the appeal on Cardano for me was I had an intuitive sense, and aesthetically what Charles was espousing, it all linked up with my kind of world optimistic view. But I didn't know if like sometimes those visionaries have problems on the operation, like it's very rare when the world links up where you have the visionary who is also practical. And so when I talk to my programming friends who are pretty brilliant, I was like, hey, what is this? What is your reaction to this? And they sort of confirmed from a mathematic perspective what I was responding to aesthetically. And that was also what helped me kind of jump in on CNFTs. And you can mint a CNFT, like what's the cost? An ADA or something. And so I just met too many artists where they're like, well, it cost me 250 in gas fees to mint the Ethereum NFT, and then it didn't sell. So if you're trying to quote unquote put 10 pieces on the market, your average artist doesn't like, I mean, I can pay $2,000 and put 10 up there, but to what end? Like, that something has to shift in that system. And I kind of was betting on that. I felt like Cardano was going to create a solution on that. And I think we're not quite at the smart contract versions of the NFTs, but I've been able to like put up and sell, and that's been, nice to have it, I don't know how to express it, but it's been nice in that anybody could do this. now. Definitely anybody could do this now, and any artist who doesn't have the means to just throw money at Ethereum could start making NFTs. And but I think there's a bigger discussion on this concept of digital real estate. Like if we think of NFTs as digital real estate, that um, we may have talked about this before, but when people invest in real estate, they go where artists have gentrified a neighborhood or are just beginning to gentrify a neighborhood. Artists historically don't have cash, so they look for the cheapest ways to live and make their art. So to very many neighborhoods in every city in America, artists have kind of transformed neighborhoods and then been priced out of those neighborhoods. And so it doesn't surprise me that the first kind of adoption of digital real estate was kind of forged by artists. Like artists are the first form of NFTs. In the future, I feel like less than 1% of NFTs will be connected to art. Right now, it feels like 99% of NFTs are connected to art.
Absolutely. It definitely, like, the only real application right now for NFTs is artwork, and that's what's like opening the door for the mainstream of, humanity to understand what an NFT is and kind of dip their toe in it, and pick up a piece. I think it really blew up in the media, and a few of the artists that, really blew up through some of that gatekeeping this past year. It has been like a whirlwind of craziness. And I think that opened up a lot of people's eyes to not only NFTs, but cryptocurrency that weren't even looking at Bitcoin or Ethereum or had like brushed all of cryptocurrency off for the past few years. Like, oh, there is a use case for this. This makes sense. Like allowing an artist to be able to control and be able to serialize all your artwork and then having somebody be able to purchase it and transfer it, and all of that makes sense. And like, I guess, how is it done before NFTs? Like in the past, like have you had to like verify your artwork for people as it sells, and how does that work in the traditional art
Well,
world?
well, so I mean, a lot of art is cataloged. A lot of professional artists have a very strict cataloging system, and but the the basic authentication has been the signature on the front or the signature on the back, and the sort of record of it. Now, as we know, that could be forged. And there's a famous story about the French painter Corot that, he painted 2,000 paintings in his lifetime, and 5,000 of them are in the US. Um, and so like, I mean, there was a time where people are like, Van Gogh painted for 8 years of his life. He drew for 2 years, and then he painted 8 years of his life. There are a lot of fucking paintings, and excuse me.
You're
And
fine.
some people don't, I mean, there are a lot of, theoretically, there are a lot of famous paintings in museums that aren't real paintings or not
Wow.
really the artist. I'm not saying Van Gogh per se, but that's been true for a long time.
Yeah, and that's crazy. And like, do you think that NFTs will help solve that in the future, and also help artists get their, like rightful pay for their artwork as it appreciates? Like I like the idea that NFTs kind of like every time they transfer a percent can go back to the artist. You know what I mean?
See that is an amazing thing. And Robert Rauschenberg, who was one of the great titans of American art, who died in the last 10, 15 years, he was one of the richest artists in the world, but there's a famous story, which may be true or not, that he sold a painting for $900, and then at auction 15 years later, it went for $97,000. And he punched the story, whether it's apocryphal or not, he punched the collector in the face and said, I've worked my ass off for all these years, and you make all this money off my back. And he started the artist royalty thing option where an artist got 5 or 10% of the resale. And California is the only state that upholds this, but NFTs, to have it built in the smart contract, that's amazing. Because I mean, you think musicians or actors, anytime that commercial plays again that an actor's in, or that beat of your music is put in a commercial, like, you get paid in perpetuity for this. Whereas an artist, once the painting's sold, they wouldn't make money. Now, theoretically, they don't give up the copyright. And if somebody went to the trouble of licensing the copyright, you would get paid. But, that's has not been enforced the way the music industry did, or the television motion picture industry.
Yeah, that's a really unique thing that I've never really thought about. And you're right. Like, I guess music artists, they get, and TV artists and movie stars and things like that, they're all getting, residual income. But I've never really thought about it in the fact that a painter or anybody with physical art, once they sell the physical object, they're not really getting any residual coming back as like, unlike most other art forms, I guess it would be.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where um, I look forward to that option on Cardano. Um, the other thing I was thinking about, what with the NFTs, is there's been a real dichotomy in the people who were involved in NFTs were not really involved in, quote unquote, the art world. And the people involved in the art world were somehow denigrating what digital artists and what, the first artists who may have been traditional artists, but just started, tiptoeing into NFTs, that they kind of didn't connect. And you would hear these art world people like talk about how outrageous it was that, Beeple's getting paid for, millions of dollars for this, when when your average person who goes into a gallery in Manhattan and sees that something's selling for $10 million, and they're like, what? That? Like, what? Why? Like, I don't understand. And so it's funny to hear, kind of, it's the same dialogue in a different system. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That does make a lot of sense. I've never really like kind of thought about it in that light, but it does make a lot of sense.
Well, well, also to hear the kind of moral aesthetic outrage of real players in the New York art world talking about the absurdity of this person, and and it reminds me of that funny joke of you want to hear moral outrage, listen to a thief when he gets stolen from.
Yeah. And were I have up currently on the screen your, like, the Shelley artwork that you did, that you minted, that were these your first kind of
So,
forays into NFTs, or where'd
so
you
yeah.
start?
So I started thinking about what what is fascinating about Cardano is it's almost like he Charles and the founding group, they created the culture before the the business, for lack of a better word. But that it was being built from the ground up, whereas and it was conceived in, a lot of most sports kind of just evolved, whereas basketball is the one game that people watch that was actually invented. A guy wrote down a set of rules and invented the game of basketball. And um, and so what I feel like Cardano is that essentially, like, Bitcoin created what it created and invented a currency and invented all that, but Cardano not only thought about all future uses and how to incorporate them as they build it, but the fact that he used, Shelley, Byron, and these figures, Voltaire. I have a triptych of Charles and a painting of Voltaire. I don't know if you can see that.
Yes, absolutely.
And so these to use these figures that are part of, our culture, as emblems of what they're building, I found that really fascinating. And I started to think that there was a lot that I could, in the way that I created a whole body of work around the idea of Walmart. I felt like Cardano allowed a lot of different things that I could explore, from the cultural entities to Charles himself, to I'm interested in exploring a number of the things with Africa. I feel like there's a lot you can do to make art about the environment itself.
Absolutely. And like I was similarly impressed, like when I first started looking into Cardano, our mutual friend Wes actually got me into it. And he was on the podcast last night actually. And as I dove into it and you learn about Shelley and Gauguin and Voltaire and all this stuff, and you dive into how deeply each individual piece was thought about and how it was going to be branded and marketed, and the history behind the project, and like the nod to history of technology and math to where it all came from. And then, like you said, with Charles giving his speeches in the whiteboard video, it seemed pretty in depth with the peer review and everything that's going on. That's kind of what struck me. And then you see the culture of it, like you said, like really evolving first, and still evolving to this day. It's growing so much. Like the culture around Cardano, the Cardano Meetup we went to down in Miami was amazing. It was a great time. Everybody was like electric to meet new friends there. I felt like getting out of COVID kind of helped that. We were all locked up studying cryptocurrency and all this stuff, and everybody was talking about it online. And it was like a moment where we all got to actually meet and see the faces of the people we've been talking to online that, have been, interested in Cardano and what's going on there in that ecosystem.
Right. I mean, when I think about the first time I made a trip to Walmart HQ in Bentonville, they the people who introduced me to, they have a whole heritage museum there, and which sort of explains the culture. But if you're just kind of a shopper and an observer of human consumption, you're like, wait, there's a culture connected to this. And whereas it feels like, what's interesting is the parallel between Walmart and Cardano. And I'm going to probably say heresy for some people, but like Sam Walton's initial idea was to only open stores in towns with less than 10,000 people. And his feeling was he wanted to give the same democratic access to goods for people in the country that people in the city took for granted. and he basically cut out the middleman. You know, when you bought a bike, when I was a kid, a, like a generic bike cost $150. When my son, how many years later, like 40 years later, I bought a bike in Walmart for $20 at one time. And it wasn't, it couldn't have been that much worse. And while the means of production costs went down, the biggest thing was squeezing out like 6 layers of middlemen that, you know, made that transaction possible. And that's what essentially decentralized finance is. It's like going to be cutting out so many layers of middlemen who have been living very well on participating in things, that transactions that they really need and never have been part of.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like all the remittance payments, like basically fees and all that stuff. It definitely seems like it can get cut out with technology.
And Charles having the idea of going and getting a billion, you know, people who would like to participate in the future in Africa, that to me is like on steroids, the same idea that you know Sam Walton had. You know, how do I bring access? And that's the key word, whether it's goods or digital services or whatever. How do I bring access to people who don't have access?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that is kind of what caught my eye with it too. Like going after, you know, bringing the digital financial world to people in the middle of Africa and signing up all of that, and I really like, you know, I've really liked the idea of Cardano getting in there with governance and identification and stuff like that. It seems like they're really working to make it affordable and usable by literally everyone. Whereas some of the kind of original blockchains, which, you know, I still hold and like and use, you're almost like getting priced out of using them at this point. You know what I mean? And it's like Ethereum, if you want to use decentralized finance on Ethereum, every click you want to make is 10 to 20 to 30 to $40 right now. And a month or two ago, there were times when that was 200 and 300. And I saw a moment there during the crash where even to do one transaction was $1,400, you know, and that's just, it's not usable. That's just not usable. And
Right.
I think
It's
that ship has gotten so big it's hard to turn, whereas Cardano kind of has thought it out beforehand.
or you know, an astronomical fee of sending, you know, funds from, you know, one of your accounts to another account, and you're like, wait, I'm paying myself and I'm losing money.
Yeah, yeah. And like the cost as an artist to even get your work on Ethereum and transfer it and everything like that eats into the cost that how is it then even possible for a customer of yours? Like were you ever running into issues, I guess, trying to do it on Ethereum where it's like the cost of this drives the price of my art into like an area where it's just
I literally went in on one, and it just, I found it too absurd. It
to
like
even do it?
just mathematically, it just didn't make sense. And it's not like when, I mean, granted, you know, the first time I sold a painting for what is an obscene amount of money, um, you know, there's that question of like, who can actually afford that? Like, that doesn't make sense. Um, and then you're in the NFT world where you're like, wait, um, very few artists can actually even afford to start this path, and who is actually buying it, and you're trading, you know, 1% for another 1%. You know, it's kind of it's just perplexing from a humanist point of view, where it didn't, if we're going to go to an idealized, like trying to make a better future, replicating the mistakes or the formats of the past isn't going to get us there.
That makes a lot of sense. Like it's got to be completely fresh. What is like your I'm clicking through here and I see like your new projects here. What's your most current project that you're working on right now?
Um, well, I did a very picking back up that thread about like living in the present and preparing for the future.
Yeah,
Uh, a couple months ago, I did a 30-day project with the ASPCA where I painted a dog a day for $1,000, and I gave $100 to the SPCA for each one of those.
that's awesome.
And I I used all the proceeds to that towards setting up NFTs and going into crypto. So it was one of those like funny things of portraits of animals and there was a philosophical idea of in COVID there wasn't it was very hard to find an animal to adopt in COVID. There were waiting lists everywhere. People's need for animals just went astronomically crazy. You needed some happy, cheerful pet in your home during COVID. I was just kind of all of my ideas are connected to like everyday life and our experiences every day. So I started doing these portraits of the dogs, but while I'm doing it, I'm listening to all these podcasts about crypto. I'm researching crypto. And it it's a very old world idea to do a mechanical painting portrait, first of all, and a pet portrait also, and then to kind of use today for tomorrow. I I I like that. And the idea of there was somebody on Twitter who has a pool related to husky. Like I painted her husky and made an NFT of that. So it's weird how like old world is very connected to the future, where the future is present.
That makes a lot of sense. Like how did what it and you kind of mentioned COVID there and that kind of struck me a little bit. Like how did you get by during COVID? Did it affect you as an artist? Kind of what did you do during that time?
Um, well, I think a lot of people were thinking about as the period away. First off, I was an artist living in the country, so in many ways I've been preparing for a pandemic my whole life. Like I I was used to going into and not seeing people for huge stretches of time. And one of my crazy ideas from 10 years ago was, how do I never leave my barn? And God, wouldn't it be great if people just made appointments with me, you know, an hour or two, and I just do a portrait of them over Zoom. Like I talk to them like a shrink would. And I like right now in the backdrop, I have this time lapse that I did of a photo I found of you. But like I could sit there and talk to someone and paint them. And so that was kind of one of my crazy ideas in COVID that seemed to be more real, more natural. Like we're going to have a lot of interactions through that screen. And even after, you know, the world opens up fully. So I was doing a lot about that in the future. And then I picked up a bunch of ideas that uh, I had started over the years and kind of just put in the back burner. Like, and so right now I'm doing social media paintings, paintings about, YouTubers, Instagrammers, influencers. I feel like that the idea of people wanting to become a brand is really fascinating to me. And so like that's the brunt of what I'm doing right now. And I remember the first time I sold a brand painting, it was an Utz potato chip painting. And this guy said to me, Utz is one of the brands I personally connect with. And I thought it was like a really puzzling sentence. Like, this grown man is connecting with a potato chip, like that seems odd. But like, that was 15 years ago, or not that long, but 10 years ago. And now it's, not only do people connect with brands, but they want to become a brand. And when in my first paintings of people shopping in Walmart, it was more the voyeuristic experience of, there's this person shopping, they're not looking at the camera, I'm following them, and it's like that, interesting, borderline creepy, observational uh, place of, we go out into the world and we notice and observe things, and we don't necessarily want to be visible while we're observing things. And when now, every day somebody sends me an image of someone in a Walmart, and they're just like brazenly, here I am standing here with Cheerios, or don't I look cute in my tennis skirt in front of in front of the candy aisle. And now the models are actually like facing the camera in a very direct way. And in the selfies didn't exist when I started this series of paintings. So there's a hyper consciousness in our representation of figures now,
I like that a lot. Like I see exactly what you're saying. Like normally, like in the past, before selfies, it wouldn't be about the person. And also one comment on the Unts thing. After we had that initial conversation and you said that about Unts chips, I went to my favorite deli and I was having lunch. And you know what the chips are at my favorite deli? They're Unts. And I had a good laugh there to myself. I was like, you know what? I appreciate these Unts chips as well. I've
Well,
loved these chips for years, and I drive like 30 minutes for these.
so I have a painting that's probably, I mean, I don't know if you can see that painting of the aisle checkout. That's probably 7 feet by 9 feet painting.
Yeah.
I have a painting that big in the museum, Georgia Museum in Athens. And it's funny, when I was on Sunday morning CBS, they kind of showcased that, and they put it in various, it just seemed to be, Stephen Colbert showed it, and it just kept getting put everywhere. And then I got a call from um, Utz, and they were like, we love all the publicity that you're getting us. We appreciate it, and we want to thank you. And I'm like, thinking this 7 by 9 foot painting really should go to Utz headquarters. And so I'm getting to the point where I think they're about to buy this painting. And and then he says, we'd like you to put together a list of your favorite Utz snacks, and we'd like to send you a care package. And I'm like, well, thank you. I can afford my own snacks at the moment, and I appreciate that. But you guys should really buy this painting.
Yeah.
And then there will be no painting buying today, but it ended up in a museum, so it was better off for me anyway.
It
But
found
that
a
was a
better.
funny moment where,
That's crazy
because
that they wouldn't.
some companies have been very. I recently did a 25-foot painting for SC Johnson at their headquarters, and and then I did several paintings for Walmart headquarters, and there's a great grocery chain in Texas called HEB, and I did paintings for their headquarters. So it's kind of weird how, um, I started this as a very like art of the everyday. Is Grocery stores are the most visited and most common interior space on the planet, and nobody really sees them as an art form. And I'm just struck by like how many photographers are now like taking interior shots of grocery stores, and how many selfies are are done in grocery stores now. It's
Well,
staggering.
and I like the evolution of where your head's going here. Like, it is very interesting to look at everybody like making themselves a brand and stuff like that. Instead of like Walmart or the store being the brand, it's like each individual now is trying to be a brand and sell something, or a service of some kind, including myself, to be honest. Like it's really during COVID, I found a way, like an outlet to kind of like, I already had some pets, but to reach out to other humans while locked into my basement and fire up the stream. And then we like started a community, and it's kind of like grown into this thing, which is kind of weird, but it is interesting. And like I see it happening all over. Like Twitch is growing, YouTube's growing, Twitter's growing, and it's like becoming this thing where people want to like stop working for other brands and like almost work towards their own.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about, and it's like our human need for connection in whatever form it takes. That even if you think you're an introverted isolationist, there's a certain amount of connection that makes you feel more alive.
That makes a Yeah, absolutely. Like that little bit of connect, even though I'm like locked in my basement and I'm happy being here, like that little bit of connection though is necessary for sure. And you reach out for it.
Right, right. And I mean, I kind of feel like part of my future, like as I learn more of these technologies, is the idea of, you know, both painting people virtually and also kind of doing sort of live time lapse. All of my social media at BOC Artist is there's a lot of, time lapse and revealing the process of the paint, and I find that, I mean, quite frankly, for me, it's mesmerizing. Like I can just watch loops over and over of somebody making something out of nothing.
Absolutely. And like watching that in the background of you right now, like that painting come to life and like get filled out is crazy to watch. And even I can only imagine from your side, because on my side of things, like it's so technically difficult. I can barely draw a stick figure. So like to watch somebody like yourself make that art come to life and like how it shades in and everything is amazing. It's like a little bit I can learn off of, but it's also something I would never be able to do.
Well, we'll maybe have a weekend at the next Cardano Summit, and we'll have a little painter's corner, and we
We're
can
gonna
just we can do some how tos.
we will have to make that happen. Maybe a little NFT section and yeah, a little painter's corner. Absolutely.
And so well, I appreciate everything you've set up here, and look forward to continuing to pick your brain on, you know,
Absolutely. Before
each.
we have done over a solid hour here, but before I let you go, where can everybody like find you, find your artwork? How do you want people to contact you? What's the best way to kind of get in touch with yourself?
So on all social media, I'm at VOC Artist, um, and I have uh, there's a guy who set up CardanoArt.io, and he's hosting my NFTs, and that's gonna, right now it's just me, but he's expanding into other artists. And so that's another way. But so Instagram, I'm pretty regular on, and trying to do my best on Reddit and Twitter. That those are harder for me. And then I did start this project of painting 1,000 dogs over the next few years, and that's on dogsofamerica.io, sort of telling the story of dogs in our lives. That's sort of a random little project on the side, but kind of, BrendanO'Connell.com is also another way, but social media is probably the easiest. Instagram is probably the one I'm most connected to. I'm trying TikTok, but it's hard. I started late on TikTok and I'm not quite sure. But I have the same handle on all media at BOC artist, Brendan O'Connell artist.
Got it. I dropped all the links in the chat. Your website, cardanoart.io, your Twitter, the Dogs of America, and we'll make sure that's all plugged in to all the YouTube. I really appreciate the time, man. I am shocked by the painting behind you. That thing is amazing. We're going to have to get in touch about that after the podcast.
Cool. So I believe Voltaire and a couple Voltaires are dropping this weekend on Cardano Art.io, and a couple of other things might be dropping as well.
Absolutely, this weekend. All right, chat, you heard that here, and we're going to make sure this gets on YouTube today, and I'll make some post about that on social media, that there are some Voltaire artworks dropping. And kind of on the way out here, I wanted to play your video of painting this Charles Hoskinson blue painting that you did here, and I appreciate the time, man. This has been a very eye-opening one into the art side of things, NFTs, and I hope to have you on again as things evolve with NFTs and our relationship, and we can kind of learn more.
Cool. I look forward to doing a Schwitz in New York when you make it to New York.
We're gonna absolutely party for sure.
All right, man. Good seeing you. Thank you.
Thanks, Brendan. Have a good one.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you for watching the YouTube videos. We really appreciate it. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, comment down below, help us out with the YouTube algorithms. And we're live 5 days a week on Twitch, 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. EST. Come check us out. Thanks for watching.